Welcome to Zoom In, Zoom Out, your global look at news from Taiwan. I'm your host, Alec MacDonald. May 20th marks 1 year since Lai Ching-te became president, a year that has been defined by increased tensions in domestic politics, increased military drills from Beijing, and a new US president with different ideas about foreign policy. Today, to discuss this challenging first year, we are joined by Kharis Templeman, a research fellow at the Hoover Institution and a professor at Stanford University. Kharis Templeman, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So to start off with, what has been the main features of Lai's first year as president?
Well, I think the most striking feature of Lai's first year as president has been the just constant partisan fighting between the executive branch and the legislature. I've been a bit surprised at how deep and broad the animosity is between the ruling party, DPP, and the opposition, TPP and KMT. I didn't expect it to get this bad this quickly.
So do you believe that this partisanship is a defining challenge of Lai's first year as president?
Yeah, I think it was an obvious challenge for him from election night on when the results were known. I mean, he only won 40% of the vote, even though he won the election. And so he was a minority president from day one. And on top of that, his party, the DPP, lost their majority in the legislature. And so it was obvious to everyone that he needed some cooperation from the opposition parties to be able to get anything through the legislature. So I was a bit surprised and a little bit disappointed, frankly, that he did not seem to reach out to the opposition effectively in that window between the election and the seating of the opposition, or the seating of the legislature. And he really has tried as much as possible, seemingly, to ignore the opposition in the legislature. And I think that is a major source of the kind of problems he's had over the last year.
Do you think that Lai's decision to not reach out to the TPP is more of a factor of his leadership role within the DPP or his leadership role as president? Which role has led him to make the decision to not reach out?
Regardless of which role he holds, I think it was in his interests to reach out and to try to peel off, obviously, the TPP. If you can't get KMT votes, the TPP is actually quite an attractive coalition partner in many ways. They hold the critical swing seats in the legislature. They're centrist. In other words, they're not as far to the pro-China right as the KMT is. And they also did very well among young voters, swing voters, in the last election. And so there are lots of reasons, I think, why you would want to try to cultivate a working relationship with the TPP. And then on top of that, the price for that relationship, to my mind, didn't seem too high in policy terms. The TPP wasn't obviously demanding radical changes in the Tsai era policies on a lot of issues. Their demands were mostly procedural, actually, and had to do with strengthening legislative oversight or the rule of law, improving prosecutorial independence, and so forth. And so, the kind of tenor of their demands may have been off-putting to Lai, but part of what being an effective leader requires is reaching out, being the bigger man in the conversation, and having the humility to recognize that you don't have the votes and you need to actually cut a deal and go hat in hand to your coalition partners.
So with that in mind, what have opinion polls been showing? What have you been hearing from the public regarding the popularity of Lai Ching-te and his party, the DPP?
Yeah, well, he's kept most of the DPP base with him, so he's depending on who's doing the polling, he's in the 40 to 45% range in support. But he is underwater. He hasn't really built on the coalition that elected him in 2024, and he's still got a majority of the country that disapproves of his approval, or disapproves of his performance as party leader. And so I think he still faces the kind of fundamental political challenge that he had the night of the election, which is he needs to expand his appeal beyond the DPP base. And that the other thing is the DPP's partisan support in the electorate hasn't really increased either. They're not in free fall, but they're not growing their base, and so until and unless they're able to do that, Lai, just as simple mathematics, needs votes from people beyond the DPP.
What do you think Lai could do to increase his popularity and approval above that 40 to 45% range?
Well, there are some issues on which the opposition and Lai, I think, share similar positions, and the debate is actually within the DPP itself. And so there is some room to be clever here and to kind of triangulate between factions or tendencies within the DPP that, for instance, oppose nuclear power and want to continue the phase out of the last nuclear plant. Lai has hinted that he might consider reversing that decision. Both the leadership of the TPP and the KMT have said that they support maintaining the last nuclear power plant, keeping it open longer. And so there's an opportunity there potentially for Lai to show some boldness and reach out to the opposition and say, I think it's in our national interests to keep this plant open. Will you work with me to make sure that that can happen?
So, with the ongoing recall votes, where the DPP has really been able to activate their base and has the momentum going on, do you think that Lai Ching-te is waiting for after these recall ends to take a less timid approach and enact more policy so that he doesn't risk alienating his own party or members that might be able to help him get over this recall hurdle and actually win a majority of the legislature back through this process?
I think that from outside, that seems to be Lai's preferred strategy. It's uh, the possibility of having a majority of your own party in the legislature is quite tempting. It would be from Lai's perspective, a much more appealing environment to work in, and so he seems to have made the decision that it's worth the potential downside risks of organizing for the recall and the upfront costs, where you further inflame the opposition and basically take Taiwan into what feels a lot like a campaign year. This was the 1 year over the next four where Taiwan was not going to have an election campaign, and now we're in campaign season again. The just daily headlines are all about the recalls and about charges and countercharges, and so that was a choice that Lai and the DPP made, and we'll see if it pays off. I should note I'm skeptical that they will be able to recall enough legislators even to create enough open seats to flip the legislature. And then the second part is they actually have to win those open seat races, and that's a pretty high bar.
So, as we have been discussing, Lai Ching-te's first year has not been without controversy or plenty of challenges. But what do you think some of his real successes have been?
Well, I think I noted he had a fair amount of continuity with his predecessor Tsai Ing-wen's policies. In some cases, that's been a really good thing, I think. None more so than in U.S. Taiwan relations. There was some considerable concern in Washington, D.C., when Lai was a candidate to be president, that he would be more challenging to deal with than Tsai Ing wen, that he would create a fair amount of uncertainty in the U.S. Taiwan relationship. And I think for the most part, he's alleviated some of those concerns. The real source of uncertainty now in the bilateral relationship is actually on the U.S. side with the new president, Donald Trump, and his kind of unpredictable approach to almost all kinds of foreign policies. So Lai, by contrast, actually looks like a stabilizing force in the relationship right now. And I think we ought to give him credit for doing the kind of hard work of alleviating worries about his approach and building up the relationship with American interlocutors. A related point is on defense and civil society resilience issues. Lai has kind of stayed the course that Tsai Ing-wen put in place, and if anything, he's really doubled down. He's foot stomped the need to increase Taiwan's civil resilience, engage in more realistic training, do military exercises that are actually not all pre-scripted and require military leadership to respond to surprises in those drills. But there's a lot that still needs to be done, and I think Lai should get credit for staying the course, for pushing this as a core part of his agenda.
How important is that stability from Tsai to Lai regarding US Taiwan relations, especially with the US president right now, Trump taking a very different approach to foreign policy that is more adversarial?
I think Lai has a steep challenge in trying to cultivate a positive relationship with the Trump administration. The I should note on defense and security issues, there's more continuity in this administration with past administrations. President Trump is not the only president who said Taiwan needs to do more for their own defense, needs to raise the defense budget, needs to take the resilience of their society and economy much more seriously than they have in the past. Trump has his own way of expressing those concerns, but there is a through line running all the way from Obama up to Trump 2.0 that consistently highlights those issues. And it's really on economics and trade, I think, that President Trump is different, significantly different from the Biden administration and from Obama and before him. And the challenge there is that, and this is a universal challenge, it's every country that's dealing with the United States and the Trump administration right now. I think Lai, to his credit, he and his team have recognized that being confrontational in an initial response to the Trump tariffs would have been, I think, suicidal for Taiwan, and they need to wait this out. They need to, make gestures of support and interest in negotiating or at least talking to the Trump administration. And I think there are lots of countries pursuing a similar strategy.
So to wrap up the interview, I want to ask if Lai Ching-te were to come to you and say, Kharis Templeman, what is one thing that you would advise me on to focus not over the next 3 years of my term, but over the next year? What is one thing that you would advise President Lai on over this next year?
I think the most critical thing for him is to have a reset with the TPP. The KMT may be too far gone, too much of a lost cause, but the TPP is the critical player in the legislature right now, and they may demand a high price to cooperate with the DPP, but I think for Lai, that price should be worth paying, and it should be obvious by now that he would be better off paying it than continuing to have a kind of united front of opponents in the legislature. And so, it means eating some humble pie and going to talk to Huang Guochang, maybe having a conversation even with Ke Wenjie, and asking what are their chief concerns about the relationship and what can Lai offer that might get them to cooperate on some of those concerns. Barring that, I think he's facing a stalemate that could potentially drag his presidency down.
Kharis, this has been a lot of fun. We could continue talking for hours about this, but unfortunately we are out of time. I do hope we get to talk again soon, and thank you so much for your insight today.
Thanks for having me on again, Alec.
This has been Zoom In, Zoom Out. For more from TaiwanPlus News, you can follow us on social media or visit our website. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.
For more stories from Taiwan and Expo 2025, download the TaiwanPlus app.